But if you want to levitate large objects, big 20-ton, 30-ton, 100-ton, 1,000-ton blocks, it doesn't matter how much it weighs. For that, you're going to have to use Caesar technology or hypersound, when sound moves beyond the speed of light. And I know that's a thing that many people go, what? Sound moves beyond the speed of light? Yes, it's one of the best kept secrets in science today and discovery. When you use Caesar technology or Caesar beams that are really vortex fields, and one of the very well studied and documented effects of a vortex field is that a vortex field distorts gravity around it. And that's how you levitate very big and large objects, is through creating a gravity-free zone around the beam of sound.
Spominjali ste pojam hiperzvuk. Zanimljivo je što on ima puno veze s našim disanjem, što ga na neki način čini puno svakodnevnijom stvari nego što bismo očekivali od nečeg što ima tako egzotično ime.
In explaining the breathing process that all of us do all the time to stay alive, we realize that our bodies are actually advanced technology itself. You know, we live, we exist, our souls are embedded in this body, which is the highest level of advanced technology, and it's all to do with natural laws of nature, what some would call biomimicry, right? We try and create and build things in science and engineering, and often we mimic and imitate nature around us, and we forget to look at ourselves. So this is one of the probably the most critical discoveries that I've made in the last 2 years or so. The fact that the air that we breathe is actually driven by sound. And it's the sound of the air we breathe that energizes the oxygen in our lungs. Because as we breathe in, the air speeds up and the sound speeds up. It goes faster and faster, from bigger to smaller and smaller and smaller apertures, as it goes from the trachea to the bronchi, bronchioli, and eventually alveoli. By the time the air and the sound of the air we breathe, remember, there's a lot of noise we make when we breathe. So by the time the sound reaches the alveoli, it's actually moving at hypersound speeds. It's moving beyond the speed of light, and it's highly, highly charged. And it is that sound and the energy of that sound that energizes the oxygen in our lungs, and that oxygen then takes the energy into our bloodstream, and that energy is then used in our body, upon which the oxygen is expelled, and it goes through the same process again. Otherwise, it makes no sense how it is that we actually survive, because we don't use the oxygen. The oxygen goes in and the oxygen goes out. The oxygen is just the carrier of the energy. So now we know how the oxygen is charged. It is charged by the sound of the air that we breathe.
Popričamo o zvuku i zdravlju. Postoje dosta dobri primjeri koji su tijekom povijesti medicine gurnuti nekako u stranu, kao što to recimo zorno prikazuje priča o Royalu Raymondu Rife-u, ali također i neka novija istraživanja i uspješni načini uništavanja stanica raka pomoću zvuka.
Well, Royal Raymond Rife is one of the greatest examples of how we can cure all disease with sound and resonance. You know, I spent 5 years at medical school in Johannesburg studying pharmaceutics. Not once did they ever tell us anything about Royal Raymond Rife. Now that doesn't make any sense, does it? It just shows you how they're trying to hide, how the pharmaceutical companies and the drug cartels are hiding knowledge and information, because curing disease is not good for business. So once you start curing people of disease, they're not going to be coming back to buy drugs from you. So keeping people sustained on constant usage of pharmaceutical medication is the plan of action. So Royal Raymond Rife's discovery in the 1920s and 30s was a huge breakthrough that was very quickly removed from the global knowledge pool so that people weren't aware of it. It is well documented that Royal Raymond Rife cured cancer at will. That the microscopes that he created were the first microscopes that could actually see living cells under the microscope. So they could actually see what was happening to the cells when you expose them to certain frequencies. And remember, everything has its own prime resonance frequency. That's what this is all about. That's what sound and resonance is all about. Understanding the prime resonance frequency. Star Trek fans will know it as the prime directive. But that's a whole nother discussion as to why you cannot breach the prime directive. It's like saying you're breaching the prime resonance frequency of creation. You're going against the resonance of everything in creation, and that cannot happen. So if you understand the prime resonance frequency of a cancer cell, you can either make it grow bigger or you can destroy it. And that's exactly what Royal Raymond Rife discovered. And he cured at will all kinds of cancers, a whole cancer ward full of cancer patients that he cured completely. And that information has been removed. If you think that it hasn't been done over and over again, you'd be mistaken. There'd been many researchers and inventors that have rediscovered this, but every time they bring this forth, they either disappear or they are paid off or the invention is bought, and that information is then hidden by the pharmaceutical industry. Very recently, a music professor from Skidmore College in the USA in 2011 showed, and he did a TED talk on this, he showed how they discovered in the music department that then started doing research with the labs at the university, how they used sound to destroy cancer cells, leukemia cells, pancreatic cells, ovarian cancer, pancreatic cancer, ovarian cancer, brain tumors, all kinds of cancers that they destroyed with sound frequencies, specific sound frequencies. The one thing that he does tell us in the little TED talk is that they found that sound frequencies between 100,000 and 300,000 hertz are particularly effective on destroying cancer cells. So that will give the independent researchers out there some direction in which to go and do some more research. Because the sooner we can actually give a real cure for cancer and a cure for disease by using sound to the people of the world, the sooner we can eliminate millions and millions of people that suffer of pain and debilitating illnesses that we can and should be able to cure. But all this stuff is hidden from humanity by the pharmaceutical industry.
Veliki prasak kao pojam je dosta dobar primjer povezivanja zvuka i nastanka svemira, barem u imaginaciji, ako već to ne možemo vidjeti uživo. No zaista postoji izmjerena veza galaksija i klastera galaksija i zvuka.
In 2003, NASA released the information that they recorded the lowest sound frequency that they've ever recorded in space. Now, that does two things. First of all, it tells us that they've recorded sound frequencies from space before, because if they say this is the lowest frequency we've ever recorded, means they've been recording sound frequencies from space before, and this is not unusual. But this was the lowest one they ever recorded, and it comes from the Perseus supercluster galaxy. It's about 250 million light years away from us. 250 million light years is just around the corner. It's not very far. But if you really understand that we can traverse space and time easily once we understand what the hell is going on. So what they measured is that at the center of this supercluster of galaxies is a giant black hole that emanates this sound frequency. And out of this seemed to come this supercluster of galaxies. And this sound resonance, this lowest note, which incidentally they tell us it resonates at B flat in music terms, which is fascinating, because into that comes a whole another beautiful level of arguments that we can go into. But it resonates at B flat. And when you look at the photographs of the images of NASA of the supercluster galaxy, it looks just like the lycopodium powder on a metal plate in Hans Jenny's documentary from the 1960s, showing how sound resonates the lycopodium powder, and it shows you the creation of surfaces on planet Earth. But here it's just a huge scale, 57 octaves lower than middle C. So it's 1,000,000 billion times lower. The frequency is 1,000,000 billion times lower than the frequency of our ability to hear. So it just shows you the lower the frequency, the bigger the shapes that are created. And there's the most perfect example how matter gets brought into creation from sound, and it seems to come from the center of a giant black hole. And that once again opens up another very important argument or a debate about what black holes are and what happens when you go through a black hole, that you're actually going into different dimensions, and that black holes or wormholes or these vortexes can be used for moving from one dimension to another and for the creation of energy, and a very exciting discussion that one can have on that.
U kontekstu hiperzvuka spomenuli ste da zvuk može biti brži od svjetlosti. Postoji li neka otkriće i eksperimenti koji dodatno potvrđuju tu tezu?
To answer that question, let's go back to what the ancient civilizations tell us. God said, "Let there be light." If sound is the source of all creation, including light, then sound must move faster than the speed of light. Light is just one element of sound that has a finite speed at which it moves through this creation. But we don't yet know everything about light, so let's not get too deep into that. But the sound thing is getting more and more interesting, because we're starting to really get to understand what the sound and resonance of creation is all about. In 2005 at Middle Tennessee State University, a number of students, which I think consisted of some of the university students and also some students from the high school nearby, actually did an experiment, and they propelled sound beyond the speed of light to move several times as fast as the speed of light. Not just faster, but many times faster than the speed of light. And this was published in the American Institute of Physics magazine in 2007, I believe, and then very quickly put away and hidden, because when you start telling people and universities and students that sound can travel beyond the speed of light, this opens up our way of thinking outside the box, and that's not good for business, once again, for those that are trying to keep knowledge and information under their control. So some people are saying, well, how is that possible? Because we don't really understand what sound is. We think of sound as the stuff that we deal with here. When I talk to you, the sound moving beyond the sound barrier, breaking the sound barrier and all that. That's not all. That's just one aspect of sound. The way that we perceive sound and resonance in this reality, in this density, on this planet. But outside and away from this planet, under different conditions, sound behaves very differently. Resonance behaves very differently. It is the foundation of all creation. So we've got to go and understand, learn a lot more about what sound is, how it works, and how this resonance brings forth this thing that we call sound. But even if you look at explaining how sound moves faster than the speed of light in this reality, all we have to do is look at how light behaves and how sound behaves. When you put light through a medium, through a crystal prism, we all have seen this experiment at school. You put the light in, the light beam in, and it breaks it down into the colors of the rainbow. It means it's slowing the light down and showing us the different colors of the light. So light through a medium is slowed down. When you put sound into a medium, it speeds up. Sound travels several times faster in water than it does through the air. The denser the medium, the faster the speed of sound. Even in this reality. So if you, in this reality, imagine an infinitely dense medium, that means that sound will travel infinitely fast through the infinitely dense medium. Now, is there an infinitely dense medium? Yes, there is. Inside the center of a black hole, which is referred to by some researchers as the vacuum, or the source of all things. If you go into the black hole, you go through that vortex of the black hole, through that event horizon, and you disappear into that black hole, that vacuum has been calculated to be infinitely dense. The density of vacuum is infinite, and many papers have been written on that. So once you go through this reality that we find around ourselves in this creation, through every atom in our body, every molecule, every atom that makes up every molecule, at the center of that atom is a little black hole that brings forth the resonance that makes up that atom. And that resonance comes out of the vacuum, out of the fabric of creation, out of the consciousness field or the morphogenetic field. And out of that morphogenetic field, which is infinitely dense, comes the information that brings forth the physical form that we find ourselves in. So Every time you speak, every thought you have, every word you say goes into every atom in your body. The resonance of what you say goes into every atom of your body, into every atom of the air around you, into the nucleus of that atom, and it goes into the morphogenetic field whose density is infinite, which means that every thought you have, everything you say goes instantly and infinitely into everything and covers all areas of creation. That's how sound moves beyond the speed of light.
Kad već pričamo o zvuku i njegovim stvaralačkim osobinama, dosta je prije nekoliko godina i napravljen eksperiment pomoću kojeg je zvukom stvorena DNK. Ko ga je napravio i kad?
Well, the spontaneous generation of DNA out of sound remains for me one of the most important and critical breakthrough discoveries that we've had in the last 5 years. In 2011, Dr. Luc Montagnier in France spontaneously generated DNA by exposing a test tube of water with that was previously exposed to DNA, but then the DNA was removed, so that it had the essence of the DNA in it. And then he exposed it to a sound frequency, and within several hours, DNA spontaneously materialized. And this is spectacular, because and once again, so sound can manifest DNA. And when you realize what DNA is, in our DNA we have encoded every aspect of our body. Everything about us is encoded in our DNA. And the DNA molecule, if you look at it, is a spiral as well. So it actually follows the laws of all natural sound principles. The vortex field, the spiral. So in our DNA, in the spiral of the DNA is encoded everything that we have. So it tells us that that sound frequency that created the DNA had encoded in it billions and trillions of smaller fractals of sound frequencies and sound resonances that could encode the DNA with all that information. So it's not just one frequency, but it's an infinite number of fractals that make up that one frequency. And this is why the study of sound and resonance is so fundamental to us starting to understand who we are, how we fit into everything, how everything is connected through the sound and resonance. Nothing is separate. Everything is connected. And the creation and the spontaneous generation of DNA by Luc Montagnier is for me the greatest example that we have in science today that shows us this without any question.
Postoji još jedan zanimljiv patent, ovoga puta vezan uz stvaranje uragana pomoću zvuka.
If you look at hurricanes and the way they spiral and move around, again, they just follow the laws of nature, and everything in creation that spirals, everything moves in a spiral fashion. Sound doesn't just travel in a straight line. Everything moves in a spiral, the way that the electrons move around the center of the atom and so forth. If you look at our planet around the sun, and the sun moves, we're never standing still. The sun is moving through space, and the planets are being dragged along by the sun in actuality. And the same goes with our galaxy. The whole galaxy is a giant spiral. If you look at the formation of a hurricane from space, it's a giant spiral that keeps moving around. So, and all of this has a resonance, a deep resonance that brings this into creation, and is the cause for all this activity, is the sound and resonance. So therefore it stands to reason that if we know how to manipulate sound and resonance, we can create hurricanes, we can create rain, we can create clouds, we can create anything we want with sound and resonance. And to that argument, I think it was in 2003 that a bunch of guys applied for a patent to patent a device that can create hurricanes and tornadoes, and by manipulating them, creating rain. And that patent, as far as I know, stands today. A patent for the creation of hurricanes through sound and resonance.
Ideje koje nas pomalo vode čak u sfere znanstvene fantastike su one vezane uz stvaranje plaštane vidljivosti pomoću zvuka. O kakvim se principima tu u stvari radi?
Well, it was in August 2014, I believe, that Lawrence Berkeley laboratories released information that they discovered a way to use sound as a cloak of invisibility, and that they understood, they learned how to manipulate sound to make things invisible. By creating specific frequencies around an object, it makes that object invisible. And we're going to be discovering more and more of this ability to use sound. And if you look at the science fiction movies and people that have had experiences with UFOs or ETs, or they often describe that they heard a sound and suddenly this UFO appeared. And it was not there, and suddenly it's there. And there's a humming noise or a humming sound, right? So it tells us that sound and resonance is connected to our ability to bring things into visibility or to make them disappear.
Jedan od egzotičnih primjera iz povijesti graničnih područja ljudskog znanja jest ne jako poznati primjer levitacije koji je napravio Viktor Grebenikov. Kad i kako je on izveo te svoje, danas smo čak rekli, pomalo zaboravljene pokuse?
Well, Viktor Grebenikov used the wings of insects to create a levitation platform, and he pasted all these insect wings on at the bottom of his famous device. It was probably about 2 feet by 2 feet, or 50 by 50 centimeters, or something like that. And on this platform, he exposed it to certain sound frequencies, resonance, and by manipulating the resonance, he was able to make this thing levitate. And the reports tell us that he could make this thing move beyond the speed of sound. He could actually make this levitation device move beyond the speed of sound, which is phenomenal. And a lot of information is available on Viktor Grebenikov for this, but you have to go to an understanding of what the hell is this all about. Because when you first tell people, oh, you stick a bunch of bugs' wings, insect wings onto a piece of wood and it can levitate, people think you're crazy. No, not that quick. Because when you see how some insects fly, like the dragonfly or the bumblebee and many other insects whose bodies are too big to be able to fly, their wings are too small, they don't flap their wings like birds. What these insects do, and the dragonfly for me is the best example because of my recent discovery of how the system actually works, which is connected to the ancient tools and ancient stone tools and artifacts that I've been finding, and what I call the cone-shaped technology, the cones that focus the sound to create Caesar beams that distort gravity around them. This is the key thing here, because in the wings of dragonflies, the wings are not filled with arteries with blood. The wings are filled with tubes that carry the resonance of the wings. As the dragonfly vibrates its wings, it creates a frequency. That frequency goes into the hollow tubes that are in the wings, and all along these tubes and at the intersections of these tubes that go from big tubes to smaller tubes, all along these tubes in the wings of the dragonflies are tiny little cones that focus the sound and the resonance in a specific direction, creating Caesar beams or vortex fields that distort the gravity. And this is how a dragonfly flies, creating a gravity-free area around it and moving through it. And that's exactly what Viktor Grebenikov discovered, this technology in the wings of insects. And he used this to create his levitation platform. And by inserting a frequency into these wings of these insects, because whether they remove from the insect or not, it's not blood, they're little tubes, right? So as long as you fill it with certain frequency, it will still have the same effect. And he created his little levitation platform. It makes perfect sense, but you first have to understand what sound is and how it works. Otherwise you think, these guys are just crazy.
Već smo raspravljali o pitanju brzine svjetlosti, koji je inače jedan od temeljaca suvremene znanstvene paradigme. Drugi kamen temeljac jest teza da energija ne može nastati ni iz čega, osim možda iz zvuka. Postoji nekoliko primjera od naprava zvanih magnetroni do načina kako napraviti vodu da vrije pomoću zvuka, koje su ljudi napravili u proteklih 50 godina. Koji su to primjeri?
Well, sound and the generation of free energy are inextricable. You cannot separate them, because sound is a source of all things, therefore sound must be the source of free energy. Everything in creation comes from an original source of something. And we're now discovering from looking at the giant superclusters like that Perseus supercluster. At the center of it, we have a sound frequency that's creating the supercluster of galaxies. So they're telling us that sound and resonance is bringing forth into creation this billions of galaxies in the supercluster of galaxies. And so sound is at the center of creating energy all the time. Peter Davey in New Zealand was a great example until a few years ago when he died. He was boiling water with sound and resonance from the 1940s already, when he tried to lodge a patent to boil water with sound. And there was a great example in one of the New Zealand news channels where they actually showed him boiling the water with his little sound device. What I found fascinating, and the water boils instantly. You put that device into the water doesn't heat up. It boils instantly because it exposes the water molecules to the frequency at which they boil. So they instantly start to boil. Again, prime resonance frequency. If you know the prime resonance frequency of boiling water, you can boil water instantly by exposing it to that frequency. It's not about heating up the molecules. That's how we think about boiling water. What's fascinating about Peter Davey, the research that I've got, is that originally he created his device before he turned it into an electrical device. There were two bicycle bells, one smaller one inside a bigger one. And by simply ringing the bell, he calculated the frequencies and he made it a specific size. And by simply ringing the bell with his finger, he made a frequency that made the water boil instantly. Now that's advanced technology as far as we're concerned today, because any scientist will tell you it's not possible to do that. Well, it is possible. We have to step out of the box of mainstream physics. Remember that out of the vacuum, out of the center of an atom, out of the little black hole at the center of the atom, comes infinite density of sound and energy. So we have the capacity to create energy if we know how to tap into that black hole, that vacuum in the center of the atom. And then the other thing is the magnetron. A magnetron is used in modern technology. In laser beams, in microwave ovens, and a tiny little magnetron can generate so much energy that it can, in laser beams, it's used to cut metal in a split second. A laser beam that just cuts the metal in metal factories, and the magnetron is driven by resonance, by sound. It's an acoustic cavity magnetron, a resonance magnetron. So once again, sound and resonance is at the source of creating very, very high energies and laser beams, and also Caesar beams, because we have giant magnetrons built in the ancient ruins and the stone circles in South Africa that are built in the shape of magnetrons, telling us very clearly that these ancient sites were used by the sound they picked up from the resonance of Mother Earth. They converted that sound into a very powerful energy and used it for whatever the ancients were using it in Southern Africa.
Spominjali ste, a u sljedećoj emisiji spominjat ćemo toga i više, drevne megalitske tehnologije, no i u novije vrijeme jedan čovjek imenom Ed Litzkalnin je oko svoje kuće, mislim na Floridi, na nikad razjašnjen način izgradio jedan kompleks megalita koji je nazvao Koraljni dvorac i on se danas tamo nalazi, ljudi ga posjećuju kao muzej. Što se zna o Edu Litzkalninu i o njegovom stvaranju Koraljnog dvorca?
Ed Litzkalnin and his coral castle at the southern tip of Florida is for me one of the best examples and the best connections to ancient knowledge and ancient tools and technology. Because Ed Litzkalnin apparently built Coral Castle by levitating and cutting and moving these giant blocks of coral stone, which is very, very heavy, and 10-ton blocks and probably heavier, moving them around, levitating them with what was described to be ice cream cones. Now, you know, from a distance, if you see a guy standing with these cone-shaped tools, and apparently two schoolboys or school kids saw him levitating and moving these giant blocks with ice cream cones in his hands. Now, to a normal person, that'll sound like a silly story. Once again, Viktor Grebennikov can levitate himself with insect wings. That sounds like a silly story, until you know that it's the tiny cones in the insect wings that create the vortex fields and the distortion of gravity. So what did Ed Litzkalnin do with ice cream cones? They weren't ice cream cones, they were very specific cone-shaped tools that focus sound, and it speeds up the sound until it shoots it out the front and creates a phaser beam, like a laser beam, but with sound. Laser beam you can see, so it looks, you know, logical, but a phaser beam you can't see. So if somebody is using phaser technology and using cone-shaped tools to create phaser beams, you can't see it, so it looks like magic. So if you're moving and levitating things with cone-shaped tools, people think that this is just insanity, they can't understand it. But that's exactly how these things work, and we're starting to understand it now. And the cone-shaped tools, as were described, that were being used by Eliteskalnen, are the common denominators in all this ancient technology. I've found cone-shaped tools all over the world, and the more I look, the more I find them. From the Americas, the Native American Indians, the medicine men use cone-shaped tools in their ceremony, cone-shaped tools in ancient mines in England, cone-shaped tools in Australia. The Mayas use cone-shaped tools. We have statues with Mayan deities holding cone-shaped tools in their hands. And all around the circles in southern Africa, I've been finding dozens and dozens of perfect cone-shaped tools that at first didn't make any sense. Now we understand, because all the ancient ruins and stone circles are connected to sound and resonance and generating huge amounts of energy with sound and resonance. The cone-shaped tools are always connected to the use of the sound by using phaser technology and levitation technology. Let me also just show you how some of these other stones ring like bells. This is what I call, and as you can see, we find many of these elongated stones. This one is full of patina. It's thick patina, so it's quite dull, but you can still hear the effect. And this is a beautiful one. This one actually rings at 2 different frequencies. Dun dun dun, dun dun dun. They're quite large. Look at this. Look at this one, and it looks also like it was inserted into something up to that point. And also, remember, they all ring like bells. This one is no exception. Alright, and on that note, there we go. That's better. That's what you want. You realize that this thing really rings like a bell, and it reverberates for quite a long time. And there you go. Demonstration how these stones ring like bells, and they were used in all kinds of ways and fashions, just like the ankh, to create specific vibrational frequencies and specific notes to use as a form and a source of energy. But one of the greatest connectors to this, to complete the story, are the cone-shaped tools that were discovered in the Sumerian temples, in the walls of the temples, inscribed with cuneiform text that tell us that the cone-shaped tools were used in the building of the temples in Sumeria. And one of the cone-shaped tools actually describes the building of the temple of Inanna. So I think we've got more than enough evidence that cone-shaped tools are in fact the advanced technology that focuses the sound like a crystal in a laser focuses the light. The cone-shaped tools focus the sound, creating phaser beams, distorting the energy, distorting the gravity, and giving us a gravity-free area with which we can levitate and move anything we want.